Hi, everyone. My name is Ron Finberg from Capitech, and welcome to our first edition of Capitech's Regulatory Compliance Summer School. With our popular quarterly compliance working groups on hiatus due to COVID, so at Capitech, we're working on a new format of short interviews covering various regulatory subjects affecting investment firms. So today with me is Mazhar Manzoor, CEO and founder of ESMA Compliance Consultants, who's going to help us cover the upcoming EU investment Prudential Regime. So first of all, Mazhar, thanks for joining me today. And how are you and your family doing during this time?
Yeah, so we're coping well. Obviously, been some changes to the routine, but getting used to it.
Yeah, I just lost you there for a second. Yeah, just skipped out. Okay. So so it's good to hear that everybody's doing well. So let's jump straight to it. So what's new with the Prudential Regime?
So we have some dramatic changes due to take effect next year. At the moment, all the investment firms have to fit under a one-size-fits-all banking model. So we've got things like the Capital Requirements Directive and the CRD, which mean that investment firms are treated exactly like all the credit institutions and banks, and have a regime that doesn't fit them at all. So it's a regime that covers a wide range of things. It covers the capital requirements, it covers governance, it covers remuneration, it covers a wide range of things, but it isn't really tailored for investment firms. The EU recognized that, and they've got two things coming in. They were passed in December, so there's 18 months, December 2019. So there's 18 months hiatus under the EU rules before they take effect. So towards the end of June 2021, we'll have a completely new regime tailored to investment firms.
Okay. And is information on all of this available, or is it still in the process of being agreed on by the EU?
So the bulk of it is available, but what we have is between now and really the end of the year, there will be a lot of RTs, and so there'll be the sort of European Banking Authority will be issuing a number of kind of publications to give more guidance in some of the areas which they haven't battened down. But there's enough that is known now that people should be planning.
Okay, and what are the main areas, the main changes? Is it going to be capital requirements, new reports, corporate governance rules? What's the big items that are being companies should be looking out for?
Probably the biggest thing that's going to affect your listeners is the changes to the capital requirements. So what we have at the moment is under the banking regime. I mentioned the CRD. You've got some 30k firms, some 30,000 euros as the initial capital requirement. You've got 125,000 and 50,000. Those numbers go up. So 730 becomes 750, which isn't dramatic. 125 becomes 150, and 50 becomes 75. But what's very radical is that going forward, the investment firms need to maintain so the bulk of your listeners here will not be class 1 firms. So class 1 firms are very large firms and effectively would fall under the sort of the PRA regime. For the majority of the people listening here, they're either going to be caught as class 2 firms or as class 3 firms, and for them the capital requirements are so if you're a 730k firm at the moment, it's quite simple. You go straight to 750. The capital requirement will typically be the higher of 3 things. So it's this initial capital requirement. It's something that is derived. It's a fixed overhead requirement, and it's something that's derived from new K factors. So what they've done is develop a model where the amount of risk that you're taking as an asset manager is recognized. So the 3 different groups of risk factors, and you've got to add the 3. So there's a risk to market, the risk to the firm, and the risk to the RTC, RT, and risk to the firm, risk to capital, and risk to the market.
Okay, and so just to understand it, just a moment. So there's going to be the minimum requirements that are going up, and then in additional,
Yes.
it could even higher than that if a firm is classified to have a certain to reach certain risk thresholds that would push them even higher than the new 750 or 150 figures you were saying.
Yes, yes. So it's going to be the highest of the three. So you'll be calculating each of these factors. So the risk, sort of very, very detailed rules, which you'll actually need to get your system to implement, because for each of those risks, it's a kind of highest of certain things. So the amount of client money you've got under management, and the amount of client money you hold, the amount of assets under management, but 150 firm.
Okay, we just lost you there.
That will affect many of the. Yeah, one of the things for the firms who deal as principal is that we're losing the matched principal exemption. So there's a special regime at the moment that means that if you deal as principal, provided you're taking no market risk on, then you at the moment you can be 125,000 firm, but going forward there's no such exemption available.
Let's Mazhar, you broke up there for a second. So let's go back on that question, on that point for a second. So right now there's a lot of 125 firms. They're called 125 UK firms, often in the CFD industry, and that they are matched principal, so they consider them riskless. So they can get away right now with doing 125. So you're mentioning, as when this goes into place in June of next year, what's going to be the capital that's going to be required from them? So is it going to go up to 750, or is it supposed to be like
there's a transitional provision, but basically they will, because the matched principal isn't available anymore, they will go to what was 730 but has now become 750. But so 750 initial capital requirement, but they still need to also compute the K factors, because if the K factors become higher, then the K factors will be what drive the amount of capital they need to keep. So as I said, there's very specific, I can give you examples of what the numbers look like, but they're within the risks to market. There are sort of several things that you look at where with certain instances it's the sum of, and with others it's the highest of the different factors.
But on the case of on those type of firms that are, when you're mentioning that the match principal carve out is going to be removed and they'll be considered principal firms, is that all taking place day 1 of June next year, or is that, you said there's going to be a staggered, like a phase in?
Well, what there's a rule, which a transitional provision, and under the transitional provisions, the amount that they currently hold, they'll only have to double. So unfortunately, that might well have consequences in terms of some admin things like reporting. They might have to be calculating under the old and the new to prove certain factors. But essentially, there'll be a ceiling. So if at the moment your capital requirement is 400,000, the ceiling during that transitional period would effectively be 800,000.
Okay, and how long is that transitional period? For example, if someone's at 125 and then you're saying that they would jump up to 250 during the transitional, how long would they be at that level before they'd go up to the minimum of the 750?
So potentially 5 years. However, the very few 125 firms in the UK are actually 125. Under the current regime, you've got the highest of 3 or 4 things, and often the FCA has also put forward an ICG for many FX-CFD firms. So that also uplifts. So in fact, you won't find that there's many FCA regulated firms that just have the 125K requirement. The credit market risk may be higher, 3 months expenses may be higher. So whichever highest of those, it's doubling that is the.
And what about companies that are registering now? Is the 125 still something that they could do, or is the UK and other European regulators taking that into account that things are changing, so they're limiting what you're able to register as a new company at the moment?
So I do a lot of FCA authorizations. I put 2 125Ks in last month. So clearly the FCA is still accepting 125K applications. But what we clearly need to have in mind when we're preparing our ICAPs is, look, what will the situation be in a year's time? Could we double the amount of capital compared to what we have now, and build all of that into our planning? So,
Okay.
so the FCA will almost inevitably be asking for ICAPs. They'll be asking for you to show that you could, at that stage, uplift to those requirements. The good news as well on the other side is many firms are already 730K. If you were near to the 125, the nice thing with somebody going in at this level is potentially they may only have to go in at a much lower level than 730 to effectively be able to deal as principal next year.
Okay.
So yeah.
And so in terms of how is it getting enforced in terms of like making sure that, like a company could do their calculations and say, oh no, we did what we found and it comes out to 200,000.
Yes. No.
Is it something you have to show every quarter or every year, or what's the process of?
No. There'll be very regular reporting for these, the class 2 firms. Class 3 will get off more lightly. So class 3 is important as well, because what's happened at the moment, you've got a lot of BIPRU firms. That BIPRU exemption is removed. So there's
what is that? If you can just define what
Yes. So what we have at the moment is some firms, rather than so under MiFID, we had essentially we moved once MiFID came, a lot of firms moved from when the last CRD came in, the regime for most of the firms that you've got on the phone here moved from BIPRU to IFPRU, and if certain requirements were met about underwriting, placing of instruments, and certain things that you said, we definitely don't do these, we don't handle client money, then it was possible to stay under the BIPRU regime. And so there are many firms right now who are under this special regime, and that 50K requirement goes there. There are a lot of that, but obviously one of the main changes, I say, is that the ICR has changed for everyone. So the ICR for a 50K has already become 75. Initial capital requirement for a 125 will become 250, 150, and the ICR for a 730 becomes 750.
Okay. And in terms of Brexit, is this something that the FCA has mentioned that they're going to apply as well, or? Yeah.
So we know for sure that at the moment the UK is due to leave the EU at December, and the current sounds from any requirement to delay that would have had to have had an application earlier. So that hasn't happened. So the likelihood is we are out of the EU by June of next year, notwithstanding, even though the EU directives will not apply to us, the FCA in June has issued a discussion paper, DP22, which people have until late September to provide their comments, and that effectively mirrors most of this. So what the FCA said is, obviously IFPR won't apply. However, they were one of the main drivers behind it when they were in the EU, and effectively they're planning to do it. So they won't necessarily take it all on board. There are one or two minor tweaks that I've noticed in the discussion paper, and happy to sort of share details of some of those.
Okay, so but more or less, in terms of like the main items, in terms of the capital requirements, this is something that UK firms, even with Brexit, should be taking into account.
They should, yes. I mean, the FCA very clearly, the discussion paper will lead to a consultation paper nearer the end of the year, but the expectation is that the same day in June, we will also move towards a separate regime for investment firms that looks very similar to the one in the EU.
Okay, and I guess moving away from the capital requirements, just to end, I know there's also some questions and some changes that are taking place with remuneration. If you can just shed some light on that as well.
Yeah, I mean, where the radical changes have taken place are for Class 1 firms. And I think many of your listeners here are not really going to be Class 1 firms. So for Class 1 firms, there's a lot of, there are RTs due to come out on how you identify the material risk takers. But really the amount of variable remuneration is fixed. The amount that can be paid has to be paid over 5 years. There are a lot of complex rules that will affect most of your listeners. So really for your listeners here, it will be mainly just you've got to have a remuneration policy in place. So in a sense, for UK firms, there won't be much change because we already have a very similar requirement.
Okay, got it. All right,
but there are a lot of other changes. There's governance changes, there are changes. The reporting will be the way that the FCA finds you out. You know, there is going to be a lot of detailed additional reporting, and the work, because the rules will come in place in June, people need to be doing some of that work now and need to be factoring some of this into their ICAPs. But there's new requirements on liquidity and requirements on all you.
Sorry, you just broke up there. So yeah. Mazhar, let's wrap it up over here. I know there's quite a few different items in terms of like the reports and the capital requirements. I think best is, since there's quite a divergence of specifics, if anyone has questions on this, I'm sure they could always reach you to kind of find out how it applies to them. So I want to thank you for your time, for giving us a little information about this and raising awareness to, I think, a regime that very few people really are really keeping in mind. I've heard a little bit whispers here and there, but not much been talking about it. So thanks for your help today, and have a wonderful weekend.
You're welcome. Yeah, thanks, Ron, and same to you. Okay.